Hey guys, welcome to 12 Tone. Today we're going to talk about figured bass. This is sort of a continuation of our 4-part writing video, so if you haven't seen that, maybe go watch it first. Figured bass, also known as through bass or basso continuo, is an alternate technique for harmonic notation originating in the Baroque era. Instead of writing chord symbols like we do today, you would provide a written bass line with markings below to indicate which intervals above that bass note are acceptable within the harmony. Why they thought that was simpler, I have no idea. But I'm glad they did because it gives you a completely different way to think about harmony. Unless you're trying to get an actual music degree, you probably won't encounter figured bass very often, but that's kind of a shame because it's really useful and really fun. In figured bass compositions, the actual structure of the bass line is important, with more smooth steps and voice leading almost serving as another melody at times. And inversions, which we haven't talked about much up to this point, pop up way more often. In fact, the primary job of figured bass notation is to tell you which chord tone the bass note is. It's a little tricky at first, but once you get used to it, identifying inversions with it is a pretty simple process. Let's take a look at an E major triad. In root position, we have E in the bass. Above that, we have G sharp, the third, and B, the fifth. Note that the intervals are always diatonic unless stated otherwise, so we don't have to tell them that the G is sharp. The key signature does that for us. Now, let's move on to first inversion. Here, our bass note is G sharp, but the chord is still E major, so what are our intervals? Going up, we have the B, which is a third above G sharp. It's a minor third, not major like the last time, but remember that the intervals are diatonic, so that doesn't matter. And the G sharp to E? That's a minor sixth. That gives us 6-3 as our first inversion notation. In second inversion, we have the B in the bass, it's a perfect fourth from there up to E, and a major sixth to the G sharp, giving us 6-4. Those are our triads, but we can also do this with seventh chords. In root position, we have E in the bass again, then 3, 5, and 7. First inversion brings the E up top, putting the G sharp in the bass and giving us 3, 5, and then 6. Second inversion moves the G sharp up, and over B we have 3, 4, and 6. While third inversion puts the D sharp in the bass, and the intervals are 2, 4, and 6. But, well, that all looks really cluttered, doesn't it? There are so many numbers under every note, and we don't actually need to write all of them every time. Root position is still the most common inversion, so we tend to assume the 5 and the 3 unless told otherwise. This means the root position triads don't actually need any numbers. The bass note tells you all you need to know. For first inversion, we just need the 6. That tells us not to play the 5, and the 3 is just assumed. Second inversion still needs 6-4 because they're both unassumed notes. For seventh chords in root position, we just have to tell them the 7, they'll know the rest. In first inversion, we have to tell them the 6 and also the 5, since 6 normally means there is no 5. For second and third inversion, to save space, we also assume the 6, so we just have to write 4-3 for second inversion and 4-2 for third. Which, now that I say it out loud, sounds kind of backwards, but, well, classical music. If you do want to use a non-diatonic note, you can accomplish that by adding an accidental to the appropriate number. For instance, if you're in F minor and you want to play a C7 in third inversion, you'd start with the bass note B flat, give yourself the figuration for third inversion, and then figure out which of those notes represents the E flat and add a sharp to it. Note that sharps and flats here only mean raised or lowered a half step. They don't have to do with the actual note name. So even though the end result here is an E natural, we still notate it in the figuration with a sharp. This just makes it easier to consistently interpret the notation. But once you have all this, what do you do with it? The term for taking a figured bass and turning it into actual music is realizing. Realizing is a lot more than just analysis. You're assigning octaves to each note, notes to each voice, you're choosing doublings, voice leadings, and creating a series of interconnected melodic lines. Historically, this was often done improvisationally with a section called a continuo making up their own voice leadings as they went, but in modern usage, we tend to see these associated with 4-part writing exercises. And realizing a piece in 4 parts requires analyzing all the chords and assigning each voice a line that smoothly takes it from one chord to the next without violating any of the rules we discussed. For instance, if we had this figured bass, starting with the first chord, we know it's a G major, so let's put the tenor on D, the alto on G, and the soprano on B. Moving on to this chord, we see it's a D major in second inversion, so let's move here, here, and here. Realizing the whole thing this way might sound something like this. And that's figured bass. Try the exercises, join our mailing list for scans of the papers from this and every episode, and keep on rockin'.